welcome to another edition of Center Stage Sweets. Today we're going to be talking about the classic Broadway musical, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and making a coffee cake inspired by the show. To get started with today's recipe, I have already put together in this bowl 1 3/4 cups of white sugar, 1/4 cup of dark brown sugar, and 1 stick of butter, and we're going to cream those together. All right, so we've got that good mix to start. Just so that you know, it's not going to be like a cookie dough where the butter totally creams in. It kind of has this like crumbly texture, but that's because we're still going to add some more fat to it, so it's not totally creamed in the way you would normally think of it. So we're actually going to add in ½ cup of vegetable oil to the mix. And give that a good mix. So I have never actually been in a production of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, but it's kind of got a special place in my heart because seeing that show at our local theater, Schenectady Light Opera Company, was the first time I actually laid eyes on the guy who would eventually become my fiance. He was in the ensemble of the show, and his sister, who I was friends with beforehand, was playing Rosemary. It was a great production. I really loved it. It was really well done. And, you know, I don't think I'd be where I am today without him, so I'm glad I went to go see it. All right, next we're gonna add in 4 eggs. And as always, I like to crack my eggs and put them into another container before putting them straight into the batter. This lets you catch if like there's any pieces of egg yolk that come in, or if for some reason the egg comes out funky, which is pretty rare. But you just want to make sure that no shells get in, and one really great way to prevent that is just by putting it into another like ramekin or bowl before you put it into the batter itself. We're gonna add in the eggs one at a time with the mixer on. This is always fun when you're doing a hand mixer trying to balance. And it doesn't have to be fully incorporated before you add the next one, just enough to really break up the yolk and the white and really get them incorporated. And sometimes like that, you just get it on the front of your mixer and just keep going. I told you I was gonna be a little messy in here. So the reason I decided to do a coffee cake for this episode is because there is a song partway through Act 1 of the show called Coffee Break, in which the members of the office are singing about how desperately they need their caffeine and how they will, what's the lyric? If I can't take my coffee break, something within me dies. Thank you for feeding that to me off screen, John. I told you he was in the show, not me. So now that we've got the eggs mixed in, we're gonna add in 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And once that is fully incorporated, we're gonna start mixing in some other stuff. So when Schenectady Light Opera did this, I had the chance to, I often volunteer at their opening night parties just to get everything set up and make sure that the cast gets to celebrate. And that day, the woman who runs our opening night parties decided that we should make coffee cakes as the dessert. So in thinking about that song and that experience of our opening night party, it's another reason why we decided to do this today. Okay, so we're gonna start adding in, alternating our dry and wet ingredients, and I'm using that term wet in quotes. We've got pre-sifted, I already put these together, 3 cups of all-purpose flour, 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 3/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. So that's already mixed together and sifted in this bowl. And then we have here 2 cups of plain non-fat Greek yogurt, and we're gonna add these into our batter, alternating dry and wet, and it should start and end with the dry. So we'll start with a little bit of the flour mixture, about 1/3 of it. I'm gonna incorporate that. Most coffee cakes, usually cinnamon coffee cakes, have kind of a cinnamon layer, which we're gonna get to in a little bit, but I've also decided to add a little bit of cinnamon into the batter itself. I love cinnamon, it's one of my favorite flavors, especially in like breakfast foods, because I'm not really a sweets in the morning person, but if you give me cinnamon in it, I'll probably be a little bit more willing to eat that sweet in the morning. And then we're gonna add in a little bit of our yogurt, about 1/2 of it, so 1 of the cups. A lot of times you'll see coffee cake recipes that use sour cream in them in place of this. I know I've said this before, I'm not the biggest fan of sour cream. It definitely is, has its purposes and it would work really well in this recipe if you didn't happen to have Greek yogurt on hand. I just like the tang that the Greek yogurt gives. It might also be lighter in calories, I don't know. All right, and now we're gonna add in more of our dry ingredients. The last of our Greek yogurt. Dry ingredients. Right, now that the batter's mixed, just eject your beaters, give them a little hit so that you get the batter that's on them. And then we're gonna set this to the side and we are gonna work on the cinnamon filling and the cinnamon topping for our coffee cake. For the filling and the topping, we've got in this bowl pre-mixed 3/4 cup of dark brown sugar, 1/4 cup of white sugar, and 2 heaping tablespoons of cinnamon. And if you're like me and a cinnamon lover, it's a big heap. And so over here on the stove, we have 6 tablespoons of butter melted. And then we're gonna take our sugar and cinnamon mixture and we're gonna divide it in half. And you just have to eyeball it, it doesn't have to be exact. All right, so I'm gonna hold this half to the side. Now with this half, we're gonna add our 6 tablespoons of melted butter and this is going to be our filling. The part without butter will be the topping for our coffee cake. So we're gonna mix in the 6 tablespoons of butter into half of the cinnamon sugar mixture. Pour that right in. And you'll see it makes this really kind of almost like really, really wet sand kind of texture to it. And we're gonna put this into the cake and we'll show you that in a minute. But it kind of creates almost like a marbleization of cinnamon throughout the coffee cake and it looks really pretty when you slice it afterwards. So I wanted to show you the pan that I'm using today. It's one of those angel food cake pans where you can actually pop the bottom out of it. The reason for using this kind of pan is so that when we put the crumble of the cinnamon sugar on top of it, it will stay on top. So when it cools later, we're able to pop the cake out from the center to let it continue to cool. And when it's fully cooled, we can just lift it off of here. Or honestly, if you're having a little trouble with that, and I have had that at times, you can just set this part of it with the coffee cake on it on the cake pedestal and just slice it from there. It might not be the prettiest thing, but it works, I promise. We're gonna spray it with some cooking spray for baking that already has the flour in it. It just makes it easier. You can always use butter and flour to grease your pan too, but I just find this so much more convenient. And you wanna really make sure that you get that part right in the middle so that it releases from there as well. And sometimes that happens when you're trying to do it. All right, now that that pan is good and greased, we're gonna start adding in our batter. So we're gonna take about 1/4 to 1/3 of our batter, depending on how much. If you only want 1 layer of cinnamon, you can put in half and then you put in the other half after you put the cinnamon sugar layer in. If you're like me and want a little bit more, we'll do it in thirds. So we're just gonna kind of pour it around. and just enough so that it kind of covers the bottom of the pan. You want to give it a little bit of a hit. Sometimes you get it in your face when you do that. And just let it flatten a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat because we are going to swirl the cinnamon sugar in with a knife. So we're just going to take little spoonfuls and kind of drop them around the coffee cake. We're not necessarily trying to create a layer of cinnamon in between, because like I said, we're gonna take a knife to it and kind of swirl it around. And we just wanna use about half of the cinnamon mixture for this layer, because like I said, we're gonna do it again. Sometimes when people make these kinds of coffee cakes with the cinnamon in the middle, you just kind of get a flat line of cinnamon, and I love that flavor so much that I just wanted to mix it in as much as I possibly can. So you just kind of take a knife, you could do this with a toothpick or a chopstick, and just kind of swirl it around. It helps kind of mix the cinnamon in a little bit more, and again, it keeps it just from being a flat layer of cinnamon in the cake, and I just love it, and it looks really pretty when it comes out and you slice it. All right, and I want to make sure you don't get any like big chunks of cinnamon in. You want to make sure it's really swirled in there nicely. So, yeah, all right. A few more areas where it can swirl a little bit. All right, and then we're going to add in our next bit of the cake batter. And you do want to save just a little bit of the cake batter for the very top of your cake too. And now we're just gonna, again, give it the little slam. And we're gonna add in the rest of that cinnamon, same way we did before, just little drops around the bowl. Make sure you get it all in there, because this, I'm telling you, this is the good part. Even it out. All right, and now for the topping. First, we're gonna get a fresh spoon out. The other one will be a little bit wet. And you're just gonna shake it over the top and make sure that everything gets nice and covered. It is okay to have these big clumps of the cinnamon sugar mixture. It actually makes for a really pretty topping and really pretty presentation when it comes out, so don't be worried. All right. Now that the coffee cake is fully assembled, we're gonna pop it into a 350-degree preheated oven for an hour. Our cake is done. You wanna test it with like a cake tester, or probably like a chopstick or a knife. If you don't have a cake tester, a toothpick just won't go deep enough to make sure that it's done. You want to make sure when you pull it out that it comes out completely clean of batter. This one actually had to go in for another 5 minutes. So every oven is a little bit different. Just, it's better to undercook than overcook, because you can't uncook something. So we're gonna let this sit here on a wire rack and let it cool for about 15 to 20 minutes before we take it out of the main portion of the pan. Just a little note, you want to make sure whatever you have it sitting on to cool, whether it's your counter with some hot pads or it's a wire rack like this, that it's level, because if it's not, the bottom will start to push up out of the pan. So we'll see you back in about 15 to 20 minutes. This has been sitting here cooling for about 15 to 20 minutes. So we're gonna remove it. Like we said, it's an angel food cake pan, so the bottom will pop off. We wanna let it cool outside the main portion of the pan, but we're gonna keep it in kind of the pedestal part of it. It's a little bit of an awkward removal. It helps if you have like a, told you, awkward. You have like or just asbestos fingers and don't mind it getting a little hot. There we go. Pull it right out. Let it cool here on the cooling rack until it is completely cool, depending on just how hot it is still. Anywhere from a half an hour to an hour. And once it's fully cooled, then we'll transfer it from this to our cake pedestal. Now that our coffee cake has cooled completely, we are ready to transfer it from the pedestal portion of the angel food cake pan to our cake pedestal. This is not something you want to necessarily rush. If the cake isn't quite ready to go, let it cool a little bit longer. You might need to get a knife to either like swirl around the inside or maybe from the bottom if it's sticking a little bit. Just be patient with it. If it looks like it's not going to move easily, you can always just pick this piece up, transfer it to the cake platter. Yeah, it might not be the prettiest thing to see the tiny bit of this sticking out, but it's not the end of the world, and that's better than having a coffee cake that's fallen apart. So here we go, moment of truth. Oh, nice. And that's why you grease your pans. Let's get these out of the way. And we're gonna put this over to, looks great though, doesn't it? We're gonna put it over to the side for a moment, and we're gonna work on the final touch, which is the glaze. So here I have 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. We've got 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Again, there's cinnamon in every aspect of this coffee cake. And we have 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And then we're gonna add in some milk. It's about maybe anywhere from 1 to 3 tablespoons. It's really gonna depend on the mixture and the consistency. So we're just gonna slowly mix in the milk here. And just a note about the dairy products or lack of dairy, I personally am lactose intolerant, so I usually use unsweetened almond milk and not necessarily like the vanilla flavored. I just try to use the straight up unsweetened almond milk, but you can use whatever dairy product or non-dairy milk you decide. They will all work well. It's all about really the final consistency here, and there really shouldn't be much of a flavor difference. So you can see we're still mixing it up here. This is about 1 tablespoon, and you can really eyeball this part. You don't need to sit here with a tablespoon out trying to figure it out. So it's clearly still a little thick, so we're gonna add in another bit of milk. And it's better to add it slower than it is to add it quickly because you can't take it out once it's in. So better to add just a little bit at a time, be patient so that you get the right consistency on this glaze. I had to take my whisk out to finish making the glaze because it was a little lumpy from the powdered sugar, but it's got this nice little drizzly texture. It actually might be easier to see with a spoon. See that? That's kind of the texture you want it to be. You don't want it super thick, but you don't want it super thin either. So we'll bring our cake back out, and these are the final touches here. And you basically just wanna, however your heart desires, you can drizzle it. I like to start from the inside and kind of work my way out. It's just about getting a little bit more of that cinnamon flavor plus now the powdered sugar, and it will run off. That is kind of the point of it. It's not meant to be a pretty perfect little design. It's just meant to, it should be rustic. That's the word I'm looking for. So we're just gonna keep getting going on this glaze. And you wanna use all of it. And again, you can use it however you want across it. If you wanna try to make patterns with the glaze, that is totally up to you. I like to see the little like lines that it makes down the side. All right, so that is the end of our glaze. And let's slice this up and have a taste. Let's see. Just so you get a 360 shot of this. It's just so pretty, and it's gonna taste so good. At least I hope. All right. And depending on the size of the slice that you want to cut for yourself and the people that you're serving, it serves about 12. You might be able to get more or less, again, depending on the sizes of slices that you want. Oh, look at that. See all that little design work right here? That is what all of that swirling with the knife with the cinnamon sugar and butter mixture does. It just kind of makes it really pretty, and every slice will look a little bit different. I would also highly suggest, because this recipe takes a little bit more time, that if you're planning on serving it for a breakfast or for a brunch, you might want to make it the night before. It'll probably just go over a little bit easier on your timing, but you know, if you're up at 5 a.m. and aren't serving breakfast till 10, knock yourself out. All right, let's get a bite of this. Definitely want to make sure I get some of that topping and that cinnamon sugar swirl inside. Let me tell you, if I can't have this coffee cake, something within me dies. If you enjoyed this recipe and this video, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram at Center Stage Sweets, and visit us for the recipe and tips and more recipes at centerstagesweets.com. Have a great day.